Hello everyone, welcome to another IT Career Talk with Professionals. And today I have a very unique title for you, a Chief Instigator. But before we begin, please don't forget to hit that red subscribe button and notification bell. So my guest today, the Chief Instigator himself, is Jonathan, or also known as JDL. Good day, JDL.
Hello, Rafi. How are you? And I hope that everyone who's listening to us right now is doing great.
Yes,
And hopefully we could have a very vibrant discussion for today.
Yes, I'm doing well today. Thank you again for joining us. And I know you're a very busy person. And so let's get into it. Can you please help us understand what a chief instigator is? Can you describe that role for us?
So in the world of technology, we come up with all of these sexy titles, though.
Yes.
And apparently nobody has taken the chief instigator position. And when you instigate something, you actually start something, right? So this entire journey in terms of creating a Silicon Valley type of environment here in the country manifested through Spring Valley Tech Corp. That's my company. Is something that I really started from basically scratch.
Mhm.
So this happened when I assumed also the presidency of the Philippine Software Industry Association. That was way back 2015. So I'm still the head of PSIA now. I don't know why. I think nobody likes the job. That's why I get to keep it for such a long time.
I
But
assumed
when
it was a lifetime role, but it's not pala. It's the...
so the irony is we do elections every year, and every year it's always the same results, no, more or less. Same
I
for a
see.
few changes within the board of PSIA. But when I assumed the role, I really respected the role of the PSIA in terms of promoting IT and software development in the Philippines. And therefore, I also have the utmost respect for the position of the presidency. So I sat down, I was actually having coffee in BGC, and I was deep in thought. And I asked myself, what really ails the Philippines when it comes to technology and innovation? So I came up with a couple of problem sets. One of them is really the the academe industry gap, no, which is relatively very challenging. The high rate last time we checked is about 3%
Mm.
for software developers. And then there's also the inequitable distribution of opportunities in the Philippines. We're more than 7,000 islands, Rafi.
Yes.
And somehow, it's concentrated on particular areas in the Philippines.
Metro
And
cities.
last but not yeah, and last but not the least, actually, is our long-standing romance with just pure services. No, that's why most of the IT BPM companies in the Philippines are all just doing services. We forgot to actually create our own products.
Right, right, correct, correct.
So I said, I need to start something. And that's how I came about with calling myself the chief instigator of Spring Valley.
Right. So what are the skills? Now you mentioned about the values that you want to bring in with the chief instigator position. What are the skills that you need to possess to be effective as on this position? Do you need coding skills? Do you need management skills? Do you need even financial skills? No, baka may PNL needed because it's starting up businesses or starting up products. Kailangan ng financial knowledge din.
So again, all of the above that
All
you
of them.
mentioned. But I think what's really evident in a role like this, and when you're starting something, is the ability to reinvent yourself on the fly
Mm.
and constantly. No. So obviously, your management skills and your leadership skills are going to be put to the test. You have to be a visionary. If you want people to actually follow you, and in this particular case, an entire nation to actually support your cause, then you need to really have a very strong vision behind what they're trying to put out.
Right.
Communications is very, very important. No? And I think that's something that is oftentimes disregarded nowadays. No? Uh, a lot of people in the technology sector are saying, "But I'm already a good coder. I'm a good innovator. I'm a good technologist." No, but apparently, uh, when you behave in teams and when you're trying to sell an idea, communications is actually at the core of all of these things. No? So you really have to communicate your thoughts and your game plan properly. And of course, again, one of the weak spots in terms of the startup ecosystem in the Philippines
Mhm.
is really the marketing aspect, because there's very few who actually know how to identify a product market fit. And then the finance aspect, no? When you ask people who are trying to do something new, so, how much do you need from me? What's the return? And how are you going to give my money back? Oftentimes, you look at blank stares. Eh. They have a good idea. They know how to, technically execute it from a technology standpoint.
Right.
But what the moving parts in terms of business is a big question mark. So those are the skills that are really now necessary. But I'd like to just give special emphasis. No, behind me it says tech for good. No, it basically is one of the missing ingredients in the technology landscape now. When you try to do something and when you try to make technology innovation space your playground, you also have to ensure that your moral compass is properly calibrated. You
Right.
have to do things that are for the good of others, because otherwise, regardless of how ambitious your vision is, if you're not going to equate it to a higher purpose, then forget about it.
Right. No. Kasi right now, I think it's tech for commerce. There's a lot of that's what sticks and maybe easier because especially if you're a startup, tech for commerce, it's easier to sell or at least convince investors because what you mentioned the return of things, right? Maybe that's an
I
aspect.
guess I guess it's also an output of what we see in media, the stories that we hear, that somehow cash is king. That concept is taken to a totally skewed level,
Mhm.
wherein it doesn't matter how you get to that point, but you know, even if you have to step on people's heads to just get there, and that's not really the essence of, number one, what Spring Valley is all about, and second is, that's it's not very Filipino. If you're going to ask me, we've always lived for somebody else. That's the reason why we have a very, very strong family component in our society. And this type of mindset needs to be applied in this particular engagement.
Right, right. You mentioned about the the employment being very concentrated on the metro hubs, right? I just saw yesterday the picture of EDSA at 6 a.m. No, it's also very traffic already, despite a lot of people already working from home or still working remotely. How do you feel about remote working in general right now? Has that helped maybe open up areas of the country as well, or it's still very early?
So I think it's quite obvious that work from home is actually a default right now, primarily because of the presence of COVID-19. But if you're going to ask me, and I'm pretty certain that most industry leaders would not agree with me on this one, this entire work from home thing is not going to work. Uh, in the long run, primarily because, number one, uh, we have designed, most especially in my sector, software sector, we've designed people to work as teams,
Yes,
right?
correct.
The usual combination there is, a lot of juniors. You've got, a few seniors that are basically teaching the juniors. And that's also configured that way to address the industry academe gap, as I mentioned earlier. Second is our workforce is relatively young, probably one of the youngest in the entire world. No, uh, I think our median age is about 23. Obviously, I'm not part of that demographic, but they still want to see each other and interact and have fun,
Yes.
not only work. as a group.
Correct, correct.
Probably the most compelling reason is that this is the Philippines. It
Okay.
is not surprising to actually walk into a Filipino household with three or four generations living under one roof.
Yes, that's
So could you
correct.
just imagine the challenges? No? Not everybody has comfortable living spaces wherein they could declare a particular corner of their house as their office. No,
Mm.
not everybody could that actually has that particular luxury. Last but not the least is in terms of IT security and connectivity.
Mm.
Most especially if you're handling financial accounts or healthcare accounts, it's very difficult for companies to actually secure the home as a as a workplace. No? And again, fiber to the home, and as much as all our friends in the telco sector have invested heavily, but it's still not very ideal.
Yes.
I think we could all agree on that particular aspect. So that's how I feel about work from home. Needless to say, this has also opened the possibility of reverse migration for the provinces. Because the last time, Rafi, that we checked, no, in as much as the IT BPM sector only goes out of, let's say, Metro Manila or Metro Cebu to a extent of about 30%.
Mm.
That's the only sector, a segment of the industry that goes out of these two major places of business. But the location of the graduates, 70% actually come from outside of Metro Manila
Right,
and
right.
Metro Cebu. So it's indirectly proportional. No? Meaning to say, there's talent all over the Philippines, all over the 7,400 plus islands. But they go where the jobs are available.
Right.
Now, the pandemic is the great equalizer because now, as long as your location has very good connectivity and you have, the right infrastructure and the right government support, then you could basically throw around work anywhere in the country now. And hopefully, all of our local leaders would also use this as leverage to enhance their business environment. So, these companies would now have options outside of the tried and tested business areas in the Philippines.
Yes, yes. Very great input. No. Speaking about graduation and also my graduation, migration, and employment in these metro hubs. No. Um. Maybe we'll ask also you. No. Your background. Like, did you always want to join the tech industry? No. I know it's been a while. No. But can you give us a background on how you started on the tech industry? Like, for example, when I asked some of my guests, like a lot of them started off playing games, and they said, "Oh, I want to make a computer game," and so ayun, computer science, computer engineering, thinking that they would make a game uh, as a career. No, how did that happen to you? How did that happen to you?
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to answer that as fast as I could because that requires a very long answer. No? So I, I'm actually not educated in anything that is technical.
Mm-mm.
So I hold a political science degree and then I took up law afterwards.
Yes.
Okay. So looking at a career either in politics, because I'm a defensor, my middle name's defensor, so it runs in the blood, or legal, or HR.
Mm-mm,
So my
mm-mm.
first job was actually for a tech company, but I was doing an HR job. I worked for Motorola, Philippines, the semiconductor plant, no?
Yes.
And I was part of the employee relations team. And a couple of other adventures afterwards. I ended up working in one of four contact centers back in the day. We're talking about the late 90s here,
Mm-mm.
Rafi. No? So there were only four contact centers then. So I ended up working for them. And I wanted to quit on my second day because I couldn't understand what the hell was going on.
Wow, really?
We
Yeah.
were like we were like headless chickens every time 9 o'clock p.m. comes around. And technically, what happens is uh, we went to the extent of actually exploring other contact centers. Then there was no academic discipline that was
Mm-mm.
related to working in a contact center, except probably mass communication, which is still not, you know, apples to apples, right?
Yes.
So, and then I was jumping around too much in the contact center space that I caught the eye of the, you know, mother association of all IT/BPM industry associations, which
Mhm.
is then called BPAP, the Business Process Association of the Philippines. It's called IBPAP now. And I became executive director for industry affairs. That's when I started, looking at all the other facets: animation, game development, healthcare information management, shared services, contact center, and then eventually uh, software, which is where I ended up. So I went to Africa first as part of
Mm.
the World Bank. I was assigned to Africa for a year. When I came back here, I had enough savings and I didn't want to have anything to do with the industry that I'm connected with now. So I put up an indoor football center. I will
Oh,
repeat
okay.
that again. An indoor football center. About a year and a half of operations, I found out that I bet on the wrong sport because basketball is still pretty much the default national sport here. So I started thinking of getting back into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, one of the people that I helped out uh, during his schooling days is now a big bad IT manager of a software company, and he said, "Sir, we're actually looking for a country manager here, though, for a UK software company. Why don't you have a chat with the owners because they're here in the Philippines?" So I did, and I got hired the same day. Didn't know anything about software development except for top line numbers,
Right.
etc. Because I was running associations already. And then the moment I got the job and changed my status in LinkedIn, the Philippine Software Industry Association comes calling, saying, "Hey, sir, you're back. Why don't you join us?" And then the
Mm.
rest is history. And then I fell in love with technology because it actually does a lot of good. Right? I've seen technology actually provide solutions to some of the problems that we have, including education right now. No, nobody was really prepared for from offline to online jump
Correct.
during 2020, and apparently technology played a major role why we're still dispensing education in this country now.
Speaking about organizations, I've noticed that you really join a lot of organizations, including PSIA. Now, is this a maybe you can discuss more about this passion of yours of being part of an organization? What your current organization aims for, and how how what programs there are available that you advocate and promote.
So my realization that I have to do something for the nation actually happened when I was an executive director of IBPAC. So,
Mhm.
overnight I became one of the most influential people here, primarily because all the investors from everywhere in the world, every time they go to government, the government would recommend, why don't you talk to these,
Right.
private industry associations?
Mhm.
And that was my job. So, I became very passionate about it. I saw that it created a lot of opportunities for our countrymen. I saw the enormous amount that it actually gives to our nation's coffers, no? To the point wherein what we're already 25 billion US dollars year on year. So that's a significant amount of the country's GDP.
Mhm.
So when I saw this, I said I have to do my part, no. And in as much as I really wanted to, I considered the job in politics because I wanted to serve. I
Yes.
think this is the best use for me, right? So don't get me wrong, Rafi. For the PSIA, we don't get paid a single centavo.
Mhm.
So this is really one of the things that I coined is for flag and country. This is one of those flag and country initiatives.
Right.
And just to be honest, it also helps out my own personal business because you're in the mix. You're in the mix of everyone in terms of who's who in
Mhm.
the technology innovation space. The new entrants that are coming in, those that are growing, and so on and so forth. And again, hopefully, a great majority of our countrymen would also develop this particular fire in terms of patriotism and nationalism. That it's not It doesn't always equate to money. Sometimes you just have to really pay your dues to a nation that has been very, very kind to you. And that's how I maintain my intensity in becoming part of all of these things. So as PSIA president, I also sit on the board of the IT and Business Processing Association of the Philippines. By virtue of that, also I sit on the board of so many academic institutions trying to help them, calibrate their curricula to what industry wants. And again, little by little, in my own small way, I'm hoping that I've contributed to the growth of the software development and IT industry here in our country.
Right, right. Thanks for that input. No? And as you mentioned earlier, we are a lot of our efforts currently are in the service industry, meaning we're not making products ourselves yet. Yes, maybe at one point we might flip that. No, we will create a lot of products ourselves. But right now, undeniably, we are still on the service area. So maybe for our audience and for given you have a very large and wide scope of visibility, how can a young IT professional or even graduating um, easily or best way to get hired? No? Kasi right now, again, maybe it's 80-20, 20% will go through entrepreneurship, but majority still will get hired. So, what are the trends you see, or trends and tips in terms for hiring, maybe from your own company or also the others that you've noticed?
So again, that 80-20 is, I wish, no, it's actually much lower. So it's
Oh,
more
it's well
like 90.
lower. Okay.
I wish it was 80-20. I would be very, very happy if that happened. So one of the things uh, that people need to consider, most especially our students who are looking at a job, no, most especially joining a technology company, is first is you got to get yourself into the door. So
Mm,
one is write a very, very good resume. Document as much as you can in terms of projects and skill sets that you have, because that will get you in the door. Once you're already inside, you better make sure that you could communicate things properly. Right now I'm not advocating not getting a formal education. That's not the message I'd like.
mm,
Because it is still a very good validation point for companies like Spring Valley. No. But the truth is the industry is more interested in what you can do rather than what you graduated from and where you graduated from, right? So again, when you're still in school, get into as many projects as possible. I know, there's a huge move from the education sector to actually, uh, you know, pursue an outcomes-based
yes.
environment. No,
Correct.
so usually, if you're part of 5 or 6 people, there's only 2 people who are going to actually work on the projects. The other four are either, buying burgers or providing the laptops, etc. No, if you have rich parents, you're probably going to house all of the 6 members in your
Right, right.
house for the entire duration of the project. But get involved, learn something, learn a skill, be it creative, be it on the front end side or the back end side. Even quality assurance is very in very high demand, right? uh don't let yourself be limited to what your school could actually teach you. So I come from an age wherein if you need to read a book, you really have to hold a physical book. That's one. You have to go to a library and obtain that book. Right now, information is as easy as clicking a mouse. So again, try to get as much out of your time getting educated, because you will really need to pull from this experience when you transition over to joining the workforce.
Right.
That's the probably another good piece of advice for folks out there is look at the trends. I get hit with this question a lot, Rafi. Sir, what's the best language to learn?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
oo. Tama, tama. Yun yung common,
And
no? Parang,
yeah,
ah,
yeah.
mm,
And I will always answer, it's the language that you are really comfortable in doing. But it also helps to look at the trends. What are companies hiring for, right? So, Python is in very high demand.
yes.
Uh, Background in machine learning and AI is,
It's gaining.
we have more
Yes.
than a million people shortage of talented individuals all over the world. And that was, by the way, pre-pandemic. So I'm pretty certain that number, has grown substantially since then, because of the data explosion of 2020. No. So learn a skill, learn a particular skill that you are good at, you're passionate at, and leverage that. No. I don't believe in employers also are looking for, everything and anything in one package.
Mm,
There's no such thing. There's very few. If you are one of those, then you're a candidate for a C-level position. No, if you're a real honest to goodness, all guns blazing type of full stack individual. But just learn a skill and be really good at it. Come up with as many projects. Make sure that your portfolio is very strong, so that when people ask you nowadays, kasi Rafi, it's very practical. Like some of the people that we hire here in Spring Valley, we give them a problem, and then we open a development environment in front of them, and then we leave them. So it's not about the beauty queen question and answer type of interviews anymore. We're actually expecting you to produce code,
mm,
at least for those applying as developers. So those are the things. I think get yourself in the door. Make sure that your resume is doesn't look like a bio data that you bought in a palenque, right? Second is make sure that you could communicate uh, what you know very well during the interviews, and then really learn the skill. And you could only obtain all of this is if you take your education seriously.
right, right. So, sir, thank you so much. No, and I'll just ask my last question for you, which is this is very common in social media. The question is how to be you po, or basically how to be as successful as you. So maybe it's a summary advice how to be you po.
My answer to that, Rafi, is don't be me, be you.
Be you.
We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. Try to find out where you're really strong at. And usually, where you're strong at is where your passion is also,
Mm,
right? Try to leverage that. We all have different gifts. I'm not a coder, but somehow I'm on top of the pyramid when it comes to the software environment, primarily because I found my niche.
yes.
My niche is in terms of, strategy, tactical approaches to problems. I understand the business side of technology
Mm-hmm.
very well, and I leverage that particular strength. So don't be me, be you.
All
No,
right.
again, that's and then second, the term success is a little bit frowned upon by really successful people.
Mm,
Okay, so don't consider yourself a success, not even for a second. Because the moment you consider yourself successful is also the time that you start decompressing. You always need that fire inside you, following, where your heart is. And if you manage to achieve a particular goal, there's a million other problems that need to be solved. So try and pick another problem to solve,
right.
and that's going to keep you busy for the remainder of your life.
Right. Right. So thank you very much now for your inputs and suggestions and advices. I also really picked up a lot on that. The follow your excellence or very strong on it and have a moving goalpost, kumbaga, so that you're always moving your success point. You're always keeping yourself busy. So audience, I hope you also picked up some tips and some learnings and you can relate to our guest today. If you have any questions, follow-ups, of course, you can always comment it below in our chat box as well. And if you're listening in podcasts, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can also message me as the author directly. So, Sir JDL, before we wrap up, no, do you have any last shout outs or invites that you want to tell our audience?
For what they're doing now. I think all of these efforts will amount to a big change for our nation. So I'd like to also thank our audience for lending me an ear, and hopefully you picked up a thing or two. Most especially when it comes to you know we need to do our part for our country in order for the Philippines to remain relevant, most especially at this digital age. So maraming salamat po sa iyo, Rafi, and to everyone else.
All right. Thank you so much. No? And we hope everyone else has a good day also. Bye bye. And of course, don't forget, if you like our content, hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell.